This comes up in almost every group coaching call I run. A woman tells me that she has reached out to a prospect maybe once or even twice, and then she stopped. And I ask why she stopped, and she doesn't say because she forgot or she got busy, but she says something like, well, I don't want to be a pest, or I don't think they're interested, or I don't think that the timing is right, or even I don't think they like me. I also want to give you the exact email that I use and I teach my clients to use when the silence has just gone too long. At the end of this video, you'll have a process and approach for follow-up that feels right to you, and you'll know how to use the email that I'm referring to, which I call the cross the line email. But first, let's talk about the story we are telling ourselves. But before we get into it, if you are a woman coach or consultant who is interested in accelerating the growth of your business, schedule a call with me and together we can decide if you might be a good fit for the program. Here is what actually happens. You meet with a client, you submit a proposal or whatever follow-up that they're looking for, you send it. A week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, maybe 3, and your brain cannot sit still. Instead, it writes a story. The story usually goes something like this. I've already followed up once and I don't want to look desperate. Or, maybe I didn't read the room right. Or maybe my pricing was just too high. Or they probably went with someone else. Here's the truth. The average professional receives over 120 emails a day. Think about that. And those with the largest inboxes are spending over 9 hours a week just sorting through them. So the most common reason that there is silence doesn't have to do with rejection. It has to do with overwhelm, and your email is likely competing with many, many others. By the way, if you were in corporate, you absolutely know this, right? You remember what it felt like to have just email after email, trying to sort it through, figuring out what priorities are. But when we get to the other side of it and it's our email, it feels personal. And here's what I hear frequently. Following up again with the client is often appreciated. They are relieved. They know that they haven't gotten back to you. And when you reach out to them, they don't have to explain the silence. You've just made it easier for them. I want you to notice something about the story that we often tell ourselves. It's almost never about them. It's not that maybe they're busy. That's worth sitting with for a minute. A story from the Accelerator. I want to tell you about a client in our community, and for the purposes of this, I will call her Rachel. And Rachel is very sophisticated. She has closed big, big deals. She has been in rooms with executives for years and years. And she had a proposal out to a client. And in a group coaching call, I asked her about what the status of that was. And she said, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to move forward. And I said, why not? And she said, well, they've totally ghosted me. And I said, which I always ask, how many times have you followed up? And she said twice. And I said, why just twice? And she said, well, I don't want to appear desperate. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure they really liked me. There was a pause, and then Rachel actually laughed, I think a little startled with herself, that when she heard the story come out of her mouth that she was telling herself. Now, remember, this was a very competent woman who never questioned herself in a corporate environment. Yet here she was claiming a deal was dead because she thought that they didn't like her. And she never would have accepted that from one of her team members when she was in corporate. She decided to send one more email, in a short one. And within an hour, the client responded saying, thanks so much for the follow-up. Let's move forward. I have watched this exact pattern play out time and time again, where somebody throws in the towel after 1 or 2 follow-up attempts. They're certain that it is dead, when in fact, what happened is it was just put on a temporary back burner. What doesn't work? Before I get to the last resort email that I mentioned earlier on, I want to talk about something further upstream, which is the follow-ups that just don't work. Almost everyone defaults to just checking in, or wanted to circle back on this, or wanted to make sure you saw this. Notice something about all 3 of those. They are all an ask for something, a reply, an update, a decision. And when someone opens an email like that, basically what they're seeing is, have you made a decision yet? And that kind of email is easy to ignore. When the follow-up is about you, how did I do? Are we moving forward? Do you have feedback? It feels exposed, but when the follow-up is about the client, it shifts from the ego to actually being useful. And that shift alone can make follow-up feel confident rather than needy. Here's the reframe. A follow-up is not a nudge. It's actually a small gift. You are bringing something to the conversation rather than asking for something. So how does that sound? Here are some examples. I've been thinking about our conversation and I had an idea I wanted to send your way and then actually give them the idea. It might be a different way to think about a problem that they raised, for example. Or I saw this article and thought of you, in which you would attach an article or a resource and add a sentence on why it's relevant to their specific situation so it doesn't feel like a generic share. Or something you said about and then name a specific detail from your conversation. Stuck with me. Here's a thought on it. Now, this one works especially well because it proves you were actually listening and thinking about them in this gap of time. Every one of these should end with something specific and easy to answer, not something vague like, let me know what you think about it, which could sit in an inbox forever. Something like, would it help if I sent over how we handled this for a similar client? Or does it make sense to grab 15 minutes to talk through this? Or what's the timeline looking like? 2 or 3 touches like this keeps the momentum going and makes it all about them. And it doesn't read as pushy because you are giving, not chasing. Now, if you've done that, 2 or 3 genuine value-added emails and you still have not heard anything, that's when I send the cross the line email and the subject line does all the work. In it, you say, I don't want to cross the line, ... Here's why it works. It names the exact fear that you have been sitting with, and it actually carries it to them and says it out loud. And nobody opens an email with that kind of subject line expecting pressure. In the body, I say something like, hi, Jason, I've reached out a couple of times and have not heard back. The last thing I want to do is cross the line from being attentive to annoying. Please let me know if it still makes sense to connect. Notice what that does. It gives them a clean, easy way to respond. And most importantly, it gives you an answer. Not a maybe, not more silence, but an answer, at least in most cases. That last part matters more than most people give it credit for, because the second best thing to a yes is clarity, where you can stop putting your emotional energy towards a deal that's just never going to close and focus on one that will. If you're sitting there thinking, you know what, I've had a few of those deals that haven't closed, schedule a call with me and we can take a look at your sales process and where you are and see if it might make sense to work together. How many times and when to let go? So to put a number on it, I would say 2 to 3 value-added emails with the cross the line email as the final one, because it makes it finite and it stops the guessing game. And once you've sent that last email and you hear nothing back, well, that's your answer. Then you know, which is actually a gift because now you can start putting your energy towards the next deal. So here's what I want you to remember. The story you're telling yourself about their silence is almost never the real reason. People are busy, not necessarily uninterested. A good follow-up brings something instead of asks for something. And if you still hear nothing after your value-added follow-ups, the cross-the-line email most often will get you a real answer instead of just more guessing. If you've got a deal that's been sitting in silence, well, now you have today's homework. And if you would like help with your sales process so you're not reinventing it every time, schedule a call with me and let's take a look at it and see if it might make sense to work together. And I'll see you on the next one.